Your career as a radio advertising professional will be one of the most satisfying and financially rewarding positions in your community. You will be working with the leaders, the movers and shakers, and some of the nicest people you'll ever meet. They serve on boards of hospitals, schools, churches, chambers of commerce, and many other organizations that improve the quality of life in your area. These people would have been yesterday's rugged and courageous pioneers. They are the real heroes of the American free enterprise system and the future of America. Now I'd like for you to meet Jeff Dostal and Van Coker.
Jeff joined the sales team at Broadcast House in Lincoln, Nebraska in 1993. His success is a result of the Warner Concept training system. One of Jeff's special gifts is growing his clients' enterprises with the marketing firepower concepts that he helped develop. Jeff was responsible for $1 million a year in advertising revenue when he left radio sales to become president of Marketing Firepower, LLC in 2005. Van began his career at Broadcast House in 1972. He grew up with the Warner Concepts training system he helped create. One of Van's special gifts is uncovering the marketing PowerPoints from the value story interview that lead to highly effective radio ad campaigns for his clients. Van was responsible for $1 million a year in advertising revenue when he left radio sales to become president of Warner Concepts in 2006.
Well, I was in radio for about a little over 3 years as a writer and had absolutely zero desire to be in sales. The sales manager kept asking me if I wanted to get into sales because he had an opening, and I said, no, I don't. And after about 3.5 years, he said, one last chance, I need a salesperson, and I'll pay a little bit more money if you get into the sales department.
Now, why did you say no?
I knew nothing about sales. I've never sold anything. I hadn't sold lemonade. And it was scary. I knew nothing about it. I'd gone to sales meetings, but I really knew nothing about radio sales. I loved writing copy. I loved that. But when he said, I'll give you a couple $100 a month more.
You love money more.
Suddenly I was interested, and we had a baby coming. Our first child was coming. So without thinking, I just said, sure, I'll do it. Well, then he told me if this doesn't work out, you can't get your old job back. But that's how I got started. And it really wasn't, I didn't want to get into sales, probably because I knew nothing about it. And I didn't feel like I wanted to take anybody's money from them. I didn't feel like, I didn't know what I had to offer. So that's how I got in.
I remember it was 1993. And I received a phone call from Norton's daughter, Lisa, who was the general manager at the radio station at the time. And I was doing some nonprofit work, and I was helping at-risk kids. And I remember her saying, you should come over and work for us. And I thought, well, doing what? And she said, sales. And I laughed, and I said, no thanks. And she said, well, why? And I said, all salespeople are weasels. I said, I don't want to be one of them. And she said, you know what, here's what you need to do. You need to come over and talk to my dad, Norton. I said, well, that's fine. And I'll never forget, Norton had that big corner office. Yeah. And I walked in, I sat down, and he said, well, why should I hire you? And I said, let's back this up a little bit. I said, you're supposed to explain to me why I'm supposed to want to work for you. And he said, all right, let me tell you a story. And he said, my dad used to own a mattress company down in Kansas. My dad did a great job at running his business. My dad didn't know very much about inviting people to come in and do business with him. He went out of business. I saw people that I care about lose their jobs. And he said the folks down the street who had an inferior product were better at inviting people to come in and spend money with them. And he said, I made that commitment at that time that I want to help business owners not have to go through what my dad's company went through. And he said, so see, Jeff, really what we're doing is we're just helping people. You know, they own a small business, they're good at what they do, but they need assistance, they need guidance, they need help on how to invite people to come in and spend money with them. That's what we're here for. So if you want to help people, this is the place to do it. And I got sold, and I remember saying to him, well, I said, don't forget, I said, I have no business experience. I have no sales experience. I have no marketing experience. I have no experience related to anything that I'm about to do. And he said, hey, that's great. He said, you don't have any bad habits. Just listen to me and do what I tell you to do, and you'll be just fine. And that was the beginning of my radio sales career. And it became an exciting thing for me.
I didn't really enjoy it wholeheartedly from day one because I didn't know what I was doing. I just didn't, I didn't know what it was all about. And I always thought it was, trying to sell something to somebody. When will this first snowfall hit? Stuff like that. So I went into it with really false pretenses. Had no idea what it was going to be like. But the more I learned about that it's not trying to sell someone something, but trying to get them to buy what I have to offer that can help them, that's when I really started to fall in love with it.
Yeah. Well, I remember the first year, I hated everything about it. I didn't like it at all. My wife was a nurse at the time, and she worked night shifts, and I remember going home in the afternoons and sitting down and watching soap operas with her, and she said, go out there and do your business. And I said, I don't like to, because everybody's saying no to me. What was real interesting that first year is learning what they were saying no to. I took it personally. I wasn't used to having people say no to me. And what I came to the realization, with the help of other salespeople and with Norton, is I came to the realization that what they were saying no to are all the other salespeople and all the other BS that had been placed in front of them.
And the ideas you've presented so far.
Yeah, and they were saying no to all that stuff. They weren't saying no to me personally. And so that was a real enlightening moment for me when I came to the realization that if I became a partner with them, if I became a consultant for them, if I became somebody that wasn't just out there trying to push my product, but really wanted to work with them and help them share their product with their customers, then all of a sudden I could get those yeses that I was looking for. And that was a major, major turning point for me. But that first year was really, really difficult. If we did not have our first child on the way that first year, I would not have continued. I would have moved on to something else, but I guess it was time to step up and be responsible.
I remember when you came into my office and you were saying, how do I tell management that I'm leaving? And I said, what are you doing? But I think it was, for me, I had that same aha moment, I think, when I finally discovered, like you said, it wasn't, they were saying no to the packages, the gimmicks, the what am I trying to sell you, instead of, they weren't saying no to help. And once I really kind of learned that if I became a resource for that client, I always thought that we were on the same team together. I was representing the radio station, but I was really working for the advertiser. And if my heart was in it to help him grow his business, then whatever happened to me would happen automatically. So the income, if the help goes out first, if you help the client grow his business, really pay attention to what they're saying, the money follows. It's not the other way around.
I think the thing that became really effective for me in sales is that persistence and consistency of my message to them that I'm here to help. And I believe what happened with my clients probably happened to a lot of other people who have been successful in sales of different kinds, but maybe especially radio, is I always saw these clients who kind of chase that shiny thing, and that person, the competitor would come in and offer something shiny, and so they jump at it. And mine wasn't ever really shiny. Mine was just the consistent same message over and over and over again, that if we tell your story to this audience, you'll become important to them and they will spend money with you. Well, that wasn't as exciting as the idea of the week or the flavor of the month.
No, but most advertisers had never heard that before from anybody.
Exactly. So it was new information to them. But what really made a difference is, as I continued to do that, those people who went away and chased that shiny thing for a while, I kept coming back and I kept sharing the same message of consistency. And eventually, after trying some of these great ideas for a period of time. They realized that what I said had some merit, and why don't we go ahead and try this with Jeff and see if he's saying something worthwhile. And I think one of the most fulfilling things for me was one of the clients that we had. I remember a competitor, he shared this story with me. He said a competitor walked in and said, would you be interested in visiting with us? And this business owner said, well, I work with Jeff Dostal. And the competitor said, so in other words, until he quits or dies, you're not spending any money with anybody else. And he said, no, that's about right. But that's a strong statement, because I think you would agree with me that by being consistent with that, the conversations that we had with business owners went way beyond advertising. Advertising was one of those things that it took us a couple minutes to take care of.
Right.
Because we took that off the plate for them and they knew that we were handling that. What we talked about were employee issues and merchandising and all these other aspects of really growing their business that no other salesperson, media salesperson, it was a conversation they weren't having. We almost had an unfair advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Because our conversation was up here and everybody else's conversation was still down here. And I think that was one of the things that really helped us be incredibly successful over the years, is taking the conversation to that level and helping them understand that we really were there for them and helping them grow.
It's like a lot of salespeople I've seen have said they couldn't get more than 5 or 10 minutes with an advertiser. But I never had any trouble getting 45 minutes, an hour. I didn't go into most meetings with some kind of a time limit. Mm-hmm. And it was because I was trying to be a resource to the advertiser and talk about those issues like you mentioned with employee issues or merchandising or what products to carry or who should we appeal to. Mm-hmm. And also his other advertising, what he was doing with somebody else. And he would ask for opinions and suggestions on what to do there.
Well, and I think it's how you present yourself and carry yourself. I know there's a lot of people in the industry that talk about, how do you get that appointment, and do you cold call? Do you get on the phone first? Do you just show up? I was always the person that I would never go to a meeting unannounced. I would never go to a meeting that they weren't ready for. Even if it was a good client of mine, I would still call them ahead of time and say, we've got a meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock. Is that still going to work with you? Because I know, and I knew then, I know that things can come up.
Things change.
They do. And I don't want to take my time to go in and meet with a business owner if they're not focused on what we're going to talk about.
It's just common courtesy.
I think it is too. But I think handling ourselves that way helped us set us apart from the competition, because I was in meetings, and I know you were too, where I'd be sitting there talking and I'd notice there would be a competitor out in the hallway waiting, and I would say, hey, do I need to take off? And no, that's just so and so from wherever. They show up all the time unannounced. And that just fascinated me, and they valued our time that we had together. But that was something that I think, because we handled ourselves as professionals, we were treated as professionals from the business we worked with.
You respected the client's time, and he respected yours as well.
Right. I remember one of the key things that Norton taught me early on was that most of your competitors, in terms of media sales reps, are going to be going after the big clients, and everybody's going after them. But there's a lot of really good businesses out there in industries that people haven't thought about, or just because of the size of the account, people don't give them the time of the day. And they're some of the people that need the most help. And I remember him telling me that if you help them grow, your budget's going to grow right along with that. And so I remember working with an audiologist, and we had not had any audiologist on the radio station. And people are like, why are you going to talk to an audiologist? They're not going to advertise on the radio because their clients have to hear. Well, a little common sense tells you that it's usually the client that's not the one making the decision. It's the oldest son, it's the oldest daughter, it's the spouse, somebody like that. And so I went in, and they were doing what the industry told them. They were sucked into the yellow pages. Right. And I remember we got, what I said made some sense, and so she began to do a little bit with us. But slowly over the course of a couple years, all of that yellow page budget was pulled out, and all of that yellow page budget plus more came over to the radio station, because we continued to make sense, and we were one of the only ones that would even go in and visit with her outside of the yellow pages. And to me, that is one of the areas that a lot of radio professionals miss out on is going after those businesses and introducing themselves to those businesses that people aren't talking to. Mm-hmm. You know, service industries was huge for us. You know, irrigation contractors, audiologists, doctors, dentists, body shops, all these companies that a lot of people don't even think about in terms of categories, who become phenomenal advertisers if you show them what to do, how to do it, why to do it, and just use that common sense.
You mentioned body shops, and when I was first started in sales, the sales manager said, we don't have any body shops on the air. So whoever gets one on, you know, $50 or something like that. And I said, this is kind of neat. So I just happened to call on a guy who had a really small body shop in a different part of town. And the conversation and the relationship got going, and pretty soon this guy was spending very little money because he didn't have much. But you could tell he really wanted to grow his business. So we started, we took a small concept and started asking for business and telling his story in a way that's consistent daily. And it wasn't long, maybe 3 or 4 years, that he's building a brand new body shop that's 4 times the size of the one he has. And the kind of feedback he would get from his customers about his advertising, you know, on a very small schedule to begin with, but as we, like your audiologist, as his business grew, our budget grew tremendously to the point where he was really a big source of revenue for the radio station. Right. But it was really only because he was generating a lot of business through from his, you know, it really started with his advertising, and he was able to do that.
Well, and I think the thing that we brought to the table, and I challenge salespeople to do the same thing on a consistent basis, is we know that belief by the client equals increased budget by the client. Well, here's the other aspect of it that a lot of sales professionals don't think about. Their belief in radio and the power of that opportunity for somebody to advertise, their belief in radio determines what they are comfortable asking for. You know, you talked about in the beginning, you felt like you were taking money. I remember at the time, 1993, when I first got started, I was asking for $250 a month, and I couldn't fathom that somebody would give me, you know, that's how I looked at it. Right. They'd give me $250 a month. And, you know, that was a really nice car payment back then. And as I began to understand the value that radio brought to the table, it's easy to ask for money. You know, I soon expanded into asking for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 a month from clients, because I knew that if they understood radio the way I understood radio, they would have amazing success with putting all of their money on our radio stations.
Well, the other side of that is, how many times do you see sales reps where the advertiser has more belief in the advertising than the sales rep does? And that makes the sales rep very uncomfortable. Right. You know, if the advertiser wants to spend $5,000 a month or $1,000 a month, whatever the number is, but the sales rep isn't comfortable with that, all of a sudden he's got shaky, sweaty hands, because what happens if this doesn't work? Instead, I feel comfortable with you giving me $300 a month, but $1,000 a month, I don't know what to do with that.
I remember I had an account. He was a young kid, probably in his early 20s. His dad was footing the bill, and he brought a franchise into town. And he had invited us down, and we were talking to him about his grand opening, about a 4-week grand opening program. And he wouldn't work with budgets, and he wouldn't talk to me about numbers. And so, just kind of, you know, backhanded on my way out the door, I said, "So what are you going to spend on your grand opening? About $80,000?" And he said, "Yeah, probably around that." And I was so proud of myself because I didn't faint. And what was interesting is I think we got about 70 of that 80,000 for the grand opening. Whereas, like you said, a lot of people would be uncomfortable because, boy, I don't want to have all that money because then I'm responsible for it. And there's too many salespeople, and I still see it today, there's too many salespeople that just want to have a little slice of the pie.
Part of it, just a part of it.
Yeah, because then they only want a little part of the blame if it doesn't work, versus I want the whole pie because we're going to make this work for you. That's the power of belief, and that's the power that the sales rep has to have in what radio can do for the client.
Until that sales rep captures the belief
right.
in what radio can do, you really have no chance.
Yep.
You have no chance of helping that advertiser become successful. All you're going to do is take that advertiser's check every month, and nothing's going to happen.
I think it's been very enlightening to be able to step away from radio sales and operate our company and still be able to engage in conversations with small business owners across the country, across all different types of industries. And the thing that I hear them say on a consistent basis is that they are so frustrated with people walking in with the package of the week or the idea of the week. They're so tired. They want somebody to step up and become a partner with them. And I really believe that if salespeople are willing to make that commitment, it'll happen, and they'll see a lot of success. But because of the fact that like we were talking about earlier, because the salesperson doesn't believe in the power of radio, because the salesperson doesn't believe that they can get more than 5 or 10 minutes, they pop in unannounced, say, hey, would you be interested in this? They lay that piece of paper down, and the business owner looks at the bottom of the sheet.
Yes or no.
And says yes or no based on how they're feeling at that moment, and then they move on. And you can't do it that way. If you really believe in what's going on, these business owners out there are looking for somebody to partner with them and to help them. And you, the salesperson, can be that individual if you're willing to step up and make that commitment.
In all the time, the 30-some years I spent in radio, working with Norton, with you, and so I always thought that's just the way everybody pretty much did it.
Focus on the client.
Focus on the client. Focus on the client, and take care of him. What happens to you? I mean, your prosperity, your income will grow because of what you've done, not because you've sold something to that client, but because you've helped him grow. And then when we got away from it, and I start working with sales reps from the other side of the table,
right.
Then you really see how all these things come out about, package selling. I've got this great idea for your client, and so forth. And
that really has nothing to do with the client.
Has nothing to do with the client that we're representing.
It's what the station is trying to sell at that moment.
And really one of the most fun things is, how they love to cut rates. They think that's what's going to get your business. And all you have to do is just say, well, I don't know, I think your rate's a little bit high, isn't it? And they cave like crazy.
But see, doesn't that go back to belief in the power of radio? I remember when the competition was reducing their rates, and we weren't. And the client would say, well, so-and-so is cutting their rates by 50% or giving me 2 for 1 or 3 for 1.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why won't you? And my comment was always, boy, I'm glad that we're not in that position.
Yeah.
And that sends a strong message to that business owner that you value your product and your service, and you're not going to do what everybody else is doing.
There's a demand for it.
Yes.
And people are willing to spend money for it.
Right.
For over 40 years since I've been in the business, I guess, in some way, I remember that how many times has radio been issued the death knell?
Yeah.
The radio's dying because
the 8-track
television, whatever. Yeah, I mean, it's like the microwave oven is going out of style.
The 8-track, the cassette,
the 8-track, the cassette,
the CD.
Yeah, right. And now we've got DVRs and everything else, and you've got iPods, and people are getting information in a host of different ways that they didn't before. But it's just really interesting. Radio's still doing extremely well, and probably better than has a better life than any other medium right now. As you take a look at the broad spectrum. So I mean, if I was starting over in radio sales today, I would want something that gave me some kind of ammunition that I could take to an advertiser and really make some sense to him, besides the election package or the first snowfall package or something like that. But once you become a valuable resource to the client, and I think you have to always think of it that way, is what can I do for this client to make his life better today? How can I leave him in a better position than he was before I came in? then I think if you do it that way, I think everything takes care of itself. But not having the kind of information we were given with the help of Norton, I don't think I could have done it. Right. I'm quite sure I couldn't have. So
right. I think with what you're saying is so true, and there's always something new coming into play in terms of where is somebody going to get their information and what are they going to listen to. And I think even now more than ever, a professional salesperson who's in the world of radio, who's good at what they do, is even in more demand. Because that client has more confusion. You know, should I be advertising on Facebook? Should I be doing my Twitter account? You know, what's SEO doing for me? All these other things, and they get really, really confused, and they go down all these rabbit trails. They need that individual to be there for them to help guide them and lead them in the right direction. But you know, if I had to share anything with somebody coming into the industry or somebody who's been in the industry for a period of time, I mean, the bottom line to me is belief. Belief in yourself, belief in what radio can do. I always looked at, every time I talked to a client, here's how it looked for me, is number one, is this idea or program or plan of attack, is it good for the client, number one. Number two, is it good for the radio station? And number three, is it good for radio overall? And if it didn't meet those three, then it didn't see the light of day. But if it met those three, then it was important, and it was important enough to share it with the client. And you know, the thing that we were able to accomplish, and I know that there's probably hundreds and hundreds and thousands of salespeople doing it today, we were able to accomplish long-term business, and that's what makes all the difference. You know, I was there for 13, 14 years, and most of my clients were on the air with me for 13, 14 years. You had clients that were on the air with you for 30 plus years, because you brought that value to them on a regular basis. And I think that's the thing that can make all the difference in the world, is be that resource, be that person that they can turn to and trust, and don't try to sell something to them just because you've got something to sell. Offer them information, offer them value, offer them your time and your service, and be willing to listen. And when you're willing to listen, you can make a difference in the lives of a lot of businesses.
Absolutely.